My name is AJ Larosa, I'm the chair of the Burlington Development Review Board, and I'd like to call our November 6th meeting to order. We will go through these items as they're listed on the agenda. Relatively full agenda this evening, so try to move through this expeditiously. We have no items on our consent agenda today. So the first item on our agenda is a public hearing. That is in ZP 24-421-176 South Winooski, Post Apartments Limited Partnership. Request for alternative compliance with form code for placement of utility. The applicant here. AJ. Okay, would you like to come on up? May I have everybody who would like to speak on this application raise their right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct on the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
Seems like you want to install a gas meter.
Correct.
Okay. Tell me about it. Seems pretty simple.
We thought so too, but or we hoped it would be. We're developing the former VFW site on South Winooski Avenue. We came before you previously in March of 2023 for the project. It's 38 units with offices for the Community Justice Center and a new home for the VFW. It's in the downtown plan, BTV downtown Main Street corridor. It's infill development, it remediates brownfield, it has intensive glazing requirements, active uses on the ground. We've tried our best to comply with form-based code. And also meet requests by Public Works for additional improvements and accommodate the historic Burlington Ravine sewer, which is partially under this building, and all the construction that you've been experiencing downtown is related to bypassing that sewer. Unfortunately, they have not been able to complete that bypass work, so we are constructing over a very large active sewer. That has complicated the site for us, but we also looked at all of the various sods. And I do have a memo that updates the one that I shared with the DRB that I can share with you. It goes into more, or sorry, the DAB. Sorry, my first bout of COVID. I'm totally good. I guess the positive for over a week, but my brain is slow.
First thing, can I ask you a question?
Yes, ask any question. We'll do our best to answer.
So, can you just explain what the options are? I have the Vermont Gas email here. So, like, what are the other options? Because really what we're looking at is alternative compliance. And I think that's measured by, can it be done any other way? And what are the consequences of doing it? So if you wouldn't mind.
The building is essentially a rectangle with a long facade facing the street. We are asking for permission to put it, if you are standing in the street looking at the building, in the lower front right corner of the building. And that is where we're seeking alternative compliance for it to be on the front. The short end on the south of the building is on part of the property line that we've already sought some dimensional relief from you in our earlier application. We're sharing a two-way drive aisle with our neighbor, and we could fit that in with a sidewalk and then the edge of the building. So the gas meter along the edge of the building on the south would protrude out into the sidewalk, making it accessible and susceptible to traffic and sidewalk cleaning. The back of the building is not allowed by Vermont Gas. I did call them again and ask to have a gas meter, so they don't allow it on the back. And then there's the north facade of the building. We designed this thinking that the prominent corner of the building was along Main Street in South Winooski. We felt that that was significant corner for the city and relating more to downtown, so we've planned to invest in our best facade materials and corner on that building, and felt that it was more visible to locate a gas meter on the north end of the building, which is an option, but there are complications because that is also the corner that has the ravine sewer underneath it. So we did not put our basement under that corner of the building. The basement's on the opposite corner where we're asking to locate the gas meter to avoid the ravine sewer. We hoped for a gas-free building, but 38 apartments need hot water, and the technology right now requires us to use gas. So the gas is only serving hot water for the apartments. The commercial uses are all using electric hot water.
This enables us to use a single meter instead of a multi-meter pack on the building. So that we try to minimize the impact of having a meter and asking for this alternate. This case.
Does that answer your question, AJ? We can go into more detail.
On the back of the building, you know, I see Vermont Gas's email and it's question of value. Did you press them on it at all? I mean, it says we would do it if there was only no other viable option.
I did call Vermont
Has anyone
Gas.
spoken to them and said there might be no other viable option? Would you do it?
I did call them a couple of weeks ago and emailed and followed up and asked if they agreed with our assessment and if there was any opportunity to put it on the back. The back of the building also does pose some technical challenges to locating a gas meter there. The depth of the lot was not enough to provide a typical double-loaded multifamily corridor building, which we've done many, and a double-loaded parking lot. So the design of the building has the second through fifth floor cantilevered over the top of the sidewalk between the compact parking spaces and the building. And the sidewalks in many areas are right up against the building. We did utilize some space back there for our electrical transformer, and then so that primary power from the street has to run to the back of the building, go into the transformer, turn around and come back through our basement to the electrical room. Getting our gas to do the same thing and have its appropriate distances from the other utilities and be finding a place along those sidewalks that are generally close to the building is also complicated.
And there's a required distance from operable windows for placement of meters so that some of the glazing requirements for this building, that's according to its code. We have a lot of windows on the ground floor. And that's so complicated. Look, finding a location that would work for us.
The back of the building is directly accessible from the parking lot, right? So while it is back, it is also easily accessible.
Yeah,
What about the south side, along the parking lot itself?
So that was the sidewalk for heating. That's right.
There's a very narrow sidewalk, which I believe always go to part of the sidewalk from the front to the back to parking. That's correct. And we also, so the parcel is not a nice rectangle that sits perpendicular to the right of way. It's more of a trapezoidal shape. And so you can see where the property line goes through, and that parking on the right is for Safe Harbor Clinic. And we share an access to easement. And so
There's a pointer there, Kirsten, if you want it, if that would be helpful.
yeah,
How about that?
dangerous. Yes.
So you have to be able to have enough space for them to back out, because before they would back out and go around the building, there was a circular drive. This next sidewalk, if we were to put the meter here, would protrude out and we wouldn't have 36 inches clear for folks in wheelchairs. This end of the building also is the home of the VFW, the BMW. And so access has been really another important feature of this building for us and for the tenants, not only our residents, but also for the VFW members, as well as folks who are utilizing the services of the Community Justice Center, which is in the other end of the building. The building's higher here and then slopes downward as it goes in this direction. So that also complicates how we are able to access and make the ramps work on the front of the building. The city wanted us to stay out of the right of way, so took us a lot to get up close for base code. And also get the access ramps and our stairs and have them outside.
This, I believe, was part of initial requirements for the form-based code, and the staff report talks about how this was part of the initial requirements that were laid out. Was this considered at all before, or was this a more recent consideration?
The gas meter location,
Right.
yeah. We always knew we needed the gas meter. Well, we'd hoped we wouldn't, but then it was clear that for the hot water we would. We had, I'm trying to think, in our initial design was really responding to a lot of the bigger items. So the gas pipe and the gas meter were not the primary things driving the design. We were trying to comply with getting the edges of the building into the required setbacks. It's kind of the opposite from most development, where you have to stay out of the setback. We had to get the building into all the setbacks. The ground improvements, the sewer, all these items were much bigger. So we definitely considered those first. And now we can use the gas meter. And we're not saying there isn't a way to do this, but we're saying technically and feasibility and for cost, this is the most clear response for us for locating that. After responding to all of the other conditions that were imposed on us for the site.
What do you have in mind for like screening it where you're proposing to do it?
Yeah, we talked about this quite extensively at the DAB. And it was their conclusion, and as ours as well, that all of the opportunities that we looked for screening of the gas meter were drawing more attention and creating more bulk to that corner of the building, as opposed to painting the gas meter. We had showed them a scale drawing of the meter that we're talking about. I know there's more pipes going in and out of it. But we discussed a low concrete wall in front of it. But people walking on the sidewalk would be able to see over the wall. So a tall concrete wall, but that didn't feel very friendly or inclined with having large openings on the public way. We talked about a tree or a plant or a planter or a metal fence or screen. It was very important for the building owner not to create areas that people could hide or trash would collect for safety, security, and cleanliness of the front of the building. And so we wanted to try to find what would satisfy all of these and screen the meter. And I think we agreed with the DAB after they talked amongst themselves and came to the conclusion it's just going to create more distraction to put something in front of this.
Call more attention to it, because whatever the screen is would be much larger and more prominent than perhaps the meter itself against the foundation needed to it. We're open.
So the north side is unfeasible because there's no basement there, and so basically the piping has to be routed to the basement to connect to the hot water heater. Is that basically?
I wouldn't say it's infeasible. Yeah, the gas pipe comes from the center of the street underground to our building. It'll come up into this gas meter and then it heads back into the building. Its destination is the
Gas
southwest corner of the building, the bottom right image. So it is possible we pull it off of the street at the north end of the building, put it on a gas meter at that location, and then it enters the building and it runs probably inside a wall up to a ceiling and across the commercial spaces, the residential lobby, and the VFW in order to find a place to come back down and it goes out water.
The other part of it is that corner is also being outlet from Main Street to something wrong.
That's assuming that the gas station never changes, right?
That's correct.
They have a lot of plans to change, they do quite well there.
Yeah.
But the other thing I would just say from the owner's perspective, with coming from the north and trying to have this very long gas line running through occupied offices, the residential lobby and all the way across, very much different than a gas connection at your home from the outside of your building to your gas stove, right? Or even to your boiler. It's a much longer run. It's in different types of spaces and
It would
putting
say,
it under the slab, it's, means you would never be able to fix it or access it. So, we have some real concerns about that.
There's a,
This-
looks like it's about 5 feet from the building to the sidewalk. And then the sidewalk,
along the street side,
yeah,
the
on South Winooski.
we had between 7.8 from the edge of the sidewalk to the building, just enough to get a switchback ramp to meet ADA into the VFW space.
So there's a ramp, and that's what I was trying to, what's
Yeah.
going on in that
Yeah.
space.
So in this location, the VFW can enter here onto a pad, go up a ramp. There's a higher concrete pad here, and then they can go up again to their door. If you are taking the stairs, you enter here and you can go up the stairs to this terrace on the right or to the left. And there's another ramp from here to go to this door. This object on the plan is representative of the stair that has to be separate from the other stair.
And the apartment entrance is where,
The apartment entrance is in this location, directly across from the elevator, and the second stair that goes out
And
of
then
there.
the other doors for the CJC, right?
so between the sidewalk and the building, you've got a lot of stairs and ramps and things like that going on.
And then,
That's what I was trying to-
but then there's the whole public sidewalk, right, after.
Yes.
To the.
I have a question for staff, Mary, this is yours, right?
It is.
Do you know if we've granted alternative compliance under this provision? For,
I do know the answer is no.
you know what the project was?
I do know that we have not granted
Okay.
alternative compliance.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, I feel like I've remembered discussing it once, but I don't remember.
This is the first that I can recall. We've had a request for something that's prohibited on a primary facade.
I think we've run into it for people on buildings not in the form-based code where the zoning asks for it not to be on the front.
Well, typically under this review, you wouldn't see it.
Right,
Staff
right,
is
right.
looking at the checklists and
That's right.
when they're showing us where those items are, we make a notation that it's compliant.
That's that. Is there anybody in the audience who wants to speak on this?
I do not see any hands raised.
Any other questions from the board?
Just one more, so with the drawing, that basically the piping and stuff is what it would look like with the gas meter in place. Is there is there a reason that it goes up high enough to hit where the siding comes through? Because it's fairly innocuous until it kind of contrasts against the siding.
Yeah. Based on our detailing of the foundation, we'll have insulation on the outside and a coating, which would allow us to color match the paint on that coating to the gas meter. The gas meter has regulations of how high it can sit above based on snow or trying to think what the goals are. So we did our rendering based on what Vermont Gas has told us, look at the bottom of the meter and the piping. And that does unfortunately make it come up into our facade. It's funny, as an architect, I don't think I'd ever be advocating for a gas meter on the front of our building. But sometimes things technically seem to make more sense.
All right, well, I think we have, we need to deliberate on this, so that'll close the next public hearing.
Can I give my updated memo to you, so that it's part of the
Right,
record?
public hearing.
Thank you for your time.
I wouldn't mind if it related to that, my first time you doing it. Thanks.
The next item on our agenda is 6264 Conger Avenue. Rebecca Granis, JSW Design Build, appeal administrative denial for old historic chimneys, is the applicant here.
Yes, it's us.
Can I get anybody who wants to speak on this application to raise their right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct, and that the Haynes and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
This is an appeal of administrative denial, so we ask the city to present first on this.
Certainly. This was my project.
Yep, Mary, you're up.
Yes, Rebecca had applied and received a permit in May of 2023 to renovate the existing duplex. To do some general exterior renovations and a single-story addition. It wasn't until afterwards the inquiry came about removing the chimneys, and as I sometimes run in that neighborhood, I observed that there were still 2 chimneys there, and we discussed the precedent of decision-making by this board, which we staff have followed since that original decision in 2006. Probably not surprising that seminal decision was in this neighborhood. And since then, this board has approved the retention of chimneys on listed historic buildings, or the removal below the ridge line and reconstruction if the building is listed on the state or national register.
So can I be clear? So they got a permit in 2023
Yes,
to do some exterior work.
exterior work and a rear addition.
And then in June of 2023, there was some as-built designs uploaded, right?
There was a discussion between the applicant and I about removal of the chimneys. And I went back to the drawings and realized that they had not been illustrated on the plans that I had approved. I did a site check and the chimneys were extant. So I explained.
So the chimneys were there in May 2023.
Correct.
Got it.
And in June 2023.
Okay, but they weren't on the approved plans.
They weren't on the approved plans. They weren't on the plans that had been submitted for staff review.
Okay.
There was a conversation that was recorded in the comments of our permit program about the possibility of removing the chimneys. I explained the precedent of decision making by this board and how our staff continue to observe that. Ultimately, Rebecca said, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to apply to have the chimneys removed. And at that point, when I ran by, I realized one of the chimneys was already gone. So that removal was not included in the May 2023 application. She did apply. Again, we discussed what the decision precedent was. Her permit was denied administratively for the removal of the 2 chimneys, as this building is within the National Register historic district. The appeal is now before you.
Yeah.
Mary, so the original permit application, was there any discussion of removal of the chimneys?
There was no discussion until after the permit had been issued.
But the plans that were approved show no chimneys.
Exterior elevation shown. It would not typically be the case that I would make a site visit to every project I'm reviewing to determine the accuracy of submitted.
So-
Chimney removal was not defined within the application, nor was it intended.
Do you know if, so in June of 2023, do you know if there were 2 chimneys or just 1?
There were two.
There were 2.
I couldn't tell you that, I just recognized it.
There were two.
And so I'm understanding that chimney removal, these are historic properties, chimneys, one of the noted historic elements.
It is included within the narrative for this property, but this duplex style, which is the most common in the neighborhood.
Question for you on that, Mary, about the chimneys. I believe we had a historical building features expert come and visit us a few years ago, and we talked about chimneys and that certain chimneys are distinctive and certain chimneys are not. Has that ever been a distinction we have made either through administrative approval or through the DRB?
Well, I mean, that's a little bit of a broad question because a cinder block chimney that was added in the 1980s is not a distinctive historic chimney. What we're looking at chimneys that are defined within building definitions of the narrative that are recognized as being contributing to the character. I think that particular element is highlighted in this neighborhood. You can see this historic photograph where this is from the National Register nomination where these buildings all have the bunny ears on top of the chimneys. They're in this photograph, and this property is the third from the right. It's just off center with its 2 chimneys. There's another photograph looking across the common area, and the buildings along Central Avenue also have the dual chimneys on them. This was defined as being the prototype of the building that set the character for the neighborhood. This was worker housing for the Queen City Cotton Mill, and these buildings were built to house their workers. So it's defined within the photographs, it's defined within the narrative as being one of those character defining features, and as such would be considered as being significant for the historic narrative of the property.
Introduce yourselves to us and walk us through your request to have the chimneys.
Great, I'm Rebecca Granis, one of the owners of JSW Design Build. Lindsay Runner, JSW Design. We were contracted by the clients, and it's reading here to do renovation on their house. Part of the process of the renovation was doing sort of a pretty major energy upgrade overhaul, which involved removing all of their gas burning appliances. And so part of this energy upgrade is house system switch to all electric, which is where the city is heading, and sort of our goal for net energy future is decarbonization. And that chimney, similar to most of the chimneys in this neighborhood, are not seated, that they were originally framed inside the building, and so they created a lot of sort of structural problems to the building as a result. So we ended up removing the chimney entirely, wanted to create space to the interior of the building to allow for a ventilation system to be installed in that place. And also that chimney, when we got up there to do work on the slate roof, it was powder. You know, the mortar was powder. So regardless of what we were going to have to do with those chimneys, it had to be taken down to be rebuilt either way. And so at that point, we had removed that chimney in the process of doing roof work and that removal.
in our conversation with Mary, we had submitted, it's like, oh, maybe she'll let us take off the chimneys, and she didn't say anything about it, it was like, maybe she didn't notice that, we're gonna clarify that to make sure that that was really clear. We're like, did you see that? She's like, I missed that. Yes, you have to keep your chimneys. It's like, that's what we thought you were going to say. So we should make sure that that happened. And then we got to the process, like, maybe it'd be worth asking the question, asking and appealing the question, because we've come to the point where there is certainly, those chimneys are there, they are pretty, but they are on most of these houses, a lot of them, several of these houses actually don't have those chimneys anymore.
Yeah.
But we sort of felt like that asking. They're kind of generic chimneys. I don't think they're that interesting compared to chimneys overall. We're not talking like a grand multi-pot, elegant grand manor house chimney. It's like they're 2 feet by 2 feet square chimneys. And they also make a giant hole in the building. They ask for lots of maintenance issues with a slate roof that we're keeping. And so we're certainly asking for the relief of like, as we move forward, maybe they're just not that important and that necessary. In addition, we had gone through asked for one of our subcontractors to estimate the cost of rebuilding sort of the faux chimney on top, like John Callow did across the neighborhood, across the park. And also Ralph, who lives next to John Callow. And the cost for replacing those chimneys to do sort of the facade style chimney in its place was about $8,000
Per chimney.
Which just started to felt like a lot to ask of our clients in the space of, it's like, that seems like a pretty high burden. And also
Just for something not functional.
for something that's not even functional anymore.
It would really just kind of come down below the roof level and be supported somehow in the attic space. It still wouldn't remain throughout the building. It would really just be visible from the outside to kind of maintain. And just to clarify from before, there were a few different, going through the history of the neighborhood, there were a few different dwelling types. This particular house was dwelling type C. It was built in, I believe, 1899 or somewhere around the end of the 1800s. There were 21 of that style of house. 6 of them no longer have chimneys at all in the neighborhood. They were taken off before historic registry in 1987 or 1988. And then there's the 2 houses that we know of on Central Ave that were removed completely and rebuilt with faux chimneys on the outside. There's also a similar house style dwelling type D in the original building of the neighborhood. 3 of those, there were 4 of those and 3 of those have only 1 chimney remaining. So and then some that have been rebuilt over the years, they all look very different. Some are tapered at the top, some are square, some are capped, they all look very different. They don't really, I think 2 really look the same anymore in this neighborhood. They've really gone through a lot of renovations over the years. So we felt like this might be a really nice time, given the cost of things these days and the work that's required in bringing Burlington up to net zero in a few years. This might be a nice time to just ask if they were still relevant.
You say you're taking out the chimney, you hold. Chimney.
There's no vision from the sky to the basement up in there.
On one side, right?
On just one side.
Yep.
But you're renovating both sides. Is that true?
We'd like to ask that as an option. Currently, the other half, they still have the existing boiler in place. We have put in alternative heating systems, but they're sort of more on a slow train to that due to the economics of it. Their hope is to phase out that boiler and make that chimney obsolete. But just the budget concerns that we have.
But that's not part of this project.
Yes, it is part of it.
It is part of this.
Yeah,
That's
Okay.
the application was for 62 and 64 Conger, so it's part of the permit. However, I'm sure taking down the chimney was part of this permit. Or I guess, well, it was, yes,
This
it was
is
all on one permit, so it's all.
somewhat off the top, but I just ask, because the elevation here of the exterior of the house proposed. And the windows are different on one side than the other. Is that intentional? Is that how it's gonna be?
That is what happened due to timing of historic guideline enforcement, and that at some point in time, the 64 unit had replaced their windows with wood windows that had no divides. And because that's what was existing, zoning code allowed them to replace those as wood clad windows, no divides. The 62 side still had the original wood divided windows, so they asked us to maintain the divides on them. It's not ideal, I don't love it.
The
I don't love
extra,
it.
the extra cost for the dividers, was the factor to not having this.
Right, past the space.
Say that one more time.
West faces the park.
Yes.
Correct, west is facing park, facing lake. Yep. I don't love that as an outcome, but that's what we have.
Your preference would be none on either.
No, my preference, we devise on all.
Oh.
That would be my preference. It was a budget concern with the client.
Yeah.
They're like, would you like to pay this much for your windows or this much for your windows? You actually have a choice.
They own both sides, correct?
Correct.
Fiber's cheaper. Fiber's cheaper. That's not relevant, but you can barter it.
I'm taking two years old, I know that's a lot of work.
So there is one chimney there now or not?
Yes, there is one still
The
there, yeah.
62 one is still remaining.
It's still in use.
That's what this is.
So just to clarify. Boiler removal is part of this permit, it just hasn't gotten to yet because of the cost reason?
It's probably, it probably won't happen within our scope of work
Okay,
at this point.
so even if this gets approved, that chimney is still functional, and so will likely remain at the closing of this permit.
I mean, we'd love to take off both chimneys.
So is there gonna be alternate venting, would that be done as part of
Yes.
this?
Yeah, we would probably accelerate the removal of that boiler. We have planned with the client to put in their third heat pump in January after the beginning of the year, just because, maximizing on the tax incentives depending on which calendar year you do each install each heat pump. But I think we do one the next calendar year, we get a higher tax incentive. So that's the spacing out of what's happening. That's looking to happen after the first of the year.
Any other questions from the board? Are there any questions from anybody online?
No hands raised.
We're gonna have to deliberate on this tonight, so.
I mean, I can speak.
Do you want to be heard?
Yeah. I'm Serena. I am one of the homeowners. So in terms of like finishing of the project, right, my mom is on one half, Ben and I with our two children are on the other. So, we kept, and Becky kept referencing cost. And I guess that's the thing that I can speak to most, is the excitement that Ben and I had about being in this neighborhood. Born and raised in Burlington, I lived in the Valley, I'm really excited about being in this neighborhood and raising the kids in the neighborhood. And doing as much as we can to keep this beautiful and it's not a major project. A bunch of we can be very fast in a historic district. Specificities, we can be even faster. But yeah, get out of here faster. So I guess just in terms of speaking about the chimney is like, and I want to work on the porches, which we have updated 15+ years. While it was falling down. Where we have to focus on the chimney or something like that. We want to take away from the so I guess that's all.
Thank you.
There's another comment I had in that. The sort of sort of like special characteristics of these particular chimneys sort of leaves them in the categories like, you could leave them off now and at some point in time, someone's like, I wanna go back and put back the original look of it, it would be very simple, just put in like a 2-foot square chimney. They don't have really significant, it's not like a decorative carved molding or like a Corinthian column, like it doesn't have a lot of substance to it where it has very distinctive nature to it, so at some level too, it's like, it's an easily replaceable at some point in time in the future, if someone wanted to do that. Just mention it.
But yet not.
Well, I mean, you can do it, but at a cost, but at this point in time, like asking to do it now, but
But see, I
Like-
think that undercuts the argument, because if you're saying it's easily replaceable, then.
well,
why
in that
wouldn't
it's
you just
easy to
say,
replicate,
you know,
ease versus cost are not the same thing. Right, you can do anything for an amount of money, but like, there's certain architectural details that are almost impossible to replace, because they're so unique and individual. There's nothing unique or individual about this particular chimney. You can take them off at some point in time in the future, you can put them back on when there's, someone chooses to do that, you can, it's like nothing lost.
I think one thing reading through the historic reasoning for the Lakeside Historic Neighborhood, right, like, the justification for the historicity and uniqueness of it is in its uniformity. And so, right, like, having all the chimneys and having buildings that are all these like 4 different types, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of non-specificity to the uniformity that has evolved in these over time, like they all had the same porch at some point in time. The last original porch is gone, there is no original front porch left on any of these buildings. You know, Bob Claremont's places, they delisted his apartments because they have no longer have any significant characteristics left to them. So like, they have sort of character in their original similarities, but they also have evolved into this like fabric and web of like individuality as well. You know, that has evolved quite a bit in the neighborhood. And it makes it richer.
Would you have to rebuild the currently existing chimney?
The plan with that one is that we had left it with some structural framing up there to hold essentially the facade chimney that will be put on top of that. It's really just really outside. Which is what our understanding with Mary is like, if the chimney's removed, yeah, you can do that as John Callow did in his property, that like, it can still look like the chimney that was there. If it doesn't go to the basement, nobody cares as long as we see it from the outside. So the plan would be to build an exterior box and have it clad in faux brick. So it would still look like a chimney, but not function as such.
And the chimney that's still there, being that if the chimneys were kept, would that one also be replaced with faux chimney and then the?
Yeah, that would be the plan for that in the future, that would no longer be, because, yeah, the idea is to remove that, because if you go to the point of electrification, then a 2-foot masonry hole in your building envelope is a huge energy deficit that I don't like. Modern builders would never put chimneys through buildings. You had a choice, you do it another way.
All right, well, we'll do it on this tonight, thank you, appreciate it.
So much.
So it's public hearing. Next item on our agenda. 65 South Winooski Avenue. Lewis Creek Builders and Robert Visco and Connie Layall. Various requests to remove existing slate and install standing seam roof to accommodate solar installation. Okay. Again, different house though.
Different house.
Got it. All right, can I get everybody who wants to be heard on this to raise their right hand? You swear the testimony you're about to give, the matter under consideration is true and correct and paying the penalties of perjury?
I do.
Okay, why don't you just walk us through what's going on?
Alrighty, I'm Lane Darfler, for those of you who don't remember me when I did work here. I'm with Lewis Creek Builders, on behalf of Connie and Bob, who are online with us tonight. They have an existing slate roof, that is aging, deteriorating. But the goal that they have is to get energy at their home. Currently, they're slightly underserved by the electrical load that they have coming into their house. So their goal is to get a solar structure on the roof, in the manner that will give them the usage they need. They have slate on the roof. we've reached out to several solar companies that they will not warranty solar structures on slate roofs. So the best option that we have found is standing seam. It's the easiest to install on and lasts the longest. And it is the option that Bob and Connie have preference over. So as Lewis Creek, we're advocating for our client's interest here. This has no relation to the other project we came before you with. We're not out here seeking these projects. But currently, the utility line coming to their home is around 120, 110 to 120 amp service. Their current need is closer to 150, so they're already underserviced. With the work we have going on at this house, they will need over 200. So this electrical usage, the solar design gets them their need, plus what they would like to use in the future with decarbonization, getting to the city's goals in mind. We have looked at alternatives with ground mounted. It's really not feasible here with such a small lot. The backyard slopes in the wrong direction. The house shades the backyard, and trees on the neighboring property also shades the backyard. The existing additions on the rear of the house, under our previous permitting, we are approved to remove and rebuild them, which is what we're working on currently. They essentially are about the same size, with a little better foundation under them. But with the solar structure requirements under code, there's only so much room we have there, which is why we have to go to the front of the house as well. And the main request here is to change from slate to standing seam. Again, we're buying that this is the best option we have. Not only is metal historic material, but it doesn't require as much penetration as other options on the market do, which means less risk for the roofing infrastructure overall, which is a big concern Bob and Connie currently have, as it is a major impact that they've been dealing with the slate that they have.
So in the staff comments, one of the things was that they did not have a report by a qualified slater. Is that, I didn't see one in the comment.
I believe that referred to our previous permits, and there was never a request for that. The previous permits are totally separate from this request, and they were for additions that were not part of the original historic house. The original permit we pulled had a request to remove the additions and rebuild them with slate roofing. It was administratively approved. We then came back and asked for amendment. Part of that amendment was to change that roofing on that rear addition to standing seam. It was also administratively approved, and we were never requested for a Slater report. This application does have a Slater's report.
Have you considered the rubber slate material?
Faux slate? We have, but you would have to do just as many penetrations as you would normal slate. And it's not our client's preference. Standing seam, you can clamp onto it. You don't have to do as much drilling into it.
So these panels on east and west sides of the houses are. So that's the orientation.
Essentially, yes.
Don't see a layout of the rest of the property. I appreciate your testimony and what can be accomplished, but it's really hard to see what the space is to actually do something different. And I think one of the things we considered in the last application like this was, what the available options are. So you just walk me through why you didn't do something in the back there?
Yeah, so the backyard slopes pretty greatly to the rear.
And which?
Yeah. So so it's away from the house towards the.
But it's west or east, which?
West.
Compass direction. Okay.
West. So it slopes pretty greatly to the rear. The house shade pretty much occupies that whole backyard from the morning till about noon time. And then the trees on the neighbor's property also provide shade in the afternoon. So we're already sloping the wrong direction to start, and then our shade coverage cuts our sunlight time. Not only that, but for code requirements, it's about 25 feet from setbacks. Is what we're being advised from Green Mountain Solar, is that that's a state requirement from each property line.
So literally.
And tell me what the breakdown of the panel wattage in the array between the front and the back? Do you have an option to put more of it in the back?
We don't, because of code requirement. We have to be 3 feet from each ridge line and side line. And that's fire code safety.
Have you considered a solar canopy over the driveway? Is that explored?
That's fire safety.
What do you mean by that?
It's not allowed. Between setback requirement and fire safety requirement, it would be considered the same thing as a, like your standard tent cover, and those aren't allowed either. Under zoning or building code. There needs to be access for emergency vehicles.
Sorry, a solar canopy doesn't need fire safety, or just the canopy?
The structure itself. So the structure itself, if you're putting something over that driveway, you're already in your setback requirement. So you're in your setbacks. One is, we want to be approved here. But two, you're blocking your emergency access for any vehicle. So we would be denied no matter what there. But number one would be your setbacks. I think Mary and Garrett could probably attest to how many temporary carports they deny every year for winter allowances. Yep.
So sort of the basic issue here is that solar people won't put solar panels on the slate roof.
Correct. They won't warranty it. So you're investing.
Yeah.
Quite a chunk of change to put something on your roof that you can't have them warranty.
This is the commonality of the other project too, is that how do you deal with that requirement to maintain slate and
I think
suggest
the real
go with
common,
solar.
I think the real commonality is how do you deal with the impact before the SA 4.3. These applications.
Of not restricting the ability to do alternative energy.
Specifically not allowed to regulate. Prohibit or have an effect of prohibiting the installation of solar collectors.
Do we have a picture of the front of the building? Yes. So what is this type of roof called? It's a gable?
Gambrel.
Gambrel. So you're not, I assume you're not putting panels on the most vertical part of the gambrel, right? It is slightly.
Our request would be to put it on the entire roof.
Sorry.
Well, not the
So you're not putting panels there. You're not putting, I understand where you're headed, but I just want to ask the question first.
We're not putting
putting
solar panels there,
solar
correct?
panels, front facade, most vertical. It's
Correct.
going on the upper portion of that.
Correct.
Can you maintain the slate
No,
on that?
we can't.
That portion is also heavily deteriorating, especially on our left-hand side of this point, so the request is that we are changing out all of the slate to make it conform altogether.
Okay, I understand that's the desire, but why can't it, I mean, you might have to replace it to reach the end of its life, but why couldn't you replace that portion of the slate if it's not gonna serve as purpose or the solar?
Yeah, I think it's aesthetically just to not break the the difference there, because it's all one material now, the preference is to have it all one material. And we would be replacing that entire slate if we were gonna be changing the roofing material elsewhere, we'd have to.
Are there any maintenance concerns or impact, like where the sheet metal might meet the slate? Is there a problem there? Or is it flush?
In terms of we were retaining it, or
If you were retaining, placing it in slate?
that's something we would be looking into if we were asked to keep that, but the preference is that we would change that out.
Any further questions? All right, anybody online want to be heard on this?
Well, I would like to say something. We bought the house in 2013, and the very first thing that we had to do was to spend over $10,000 to repair the slate. The previous owner couldn't afford to live in the house, and it was very badly deteriorated. There were a lot of issues with the house, and we've done a lot in our time in the house. In terms of upgrading the windows, not upgrading them, but literally restoring all the windows in the house. We've had a gentleman who works down at the Shelburne Museum remove every single window and painstakingly return it to its original glory. I mean, we want the house to look like the historic house that it is, and we're trying to respect that as much as we can, but also at the same time being ever mindful of what energy costs and sustainability, et cetera, et cetera. We'd like very much to go with a more permanent material. As it is, we've already clad a large part of the house in hardy board, which will last indefinitely, and it cost a very large amount of money in order to do that, but yet maintain the appearance of what the house looked like, which was rotting cedar shakes when we bought it. There are 4 houses on the other side of the street from us, all with metal roofs. There's a huge apartment building across the street, clad in metal roof. The neighborhood, the slate isn't as, it isn't uniform up and down the street. I don't know how that happened, but there are, as I said, a number of houses with metal roofs there already. We've been told over and over that mixing the slate and metal is not an aesthetically good look. It's also not probably from an engineering standpoint, not the best way to go. And we want the house to, be aesthetically pleasing from all vantage points of the house. But at the same time, we do want to reduce the amount of our dependency on electric being brought to the house, particularly going forward. I mean, we're hoping this house is good to 2050 and beyond in the configuration that we will have. My last home, which I sold, had a metal roof and had already been on the house for, I don't know, 25 years. Looked as good as the day we put it on. And it went through, I don't know how many hurricanes in the process.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll close the public hearing. So the next item on our agenda is 184, 186 North Winooski Avenue. Red and get it wrong.
She's online.
Rosso. We have an applicant.
He is online. Oh, I see Brett is online and the architect is Miss Aloisi, and she's also online. Her
Okay.
hands are raised.
So. Yes, can you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is true and correct in the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
I do.
Okay, and Miss, I understand that you're gonna present on this?
If Mary's not gonna walk through the findings and the report. Sure.
Well, why don't you, it's not on our consent agenda, so just what are the changes you're looking for here?
You'd have to bring up the drawings.
Look at them. You want me to do this?
And Brett, do you want to go through your items? Or do you want me to?
Well, I think if you want, if the drones get up, I can highlight kind of like an overview for everybody. Essentially, and then maybe you can dive a little bit deeper if needed. So,
Okay.
so essentially, the 180 North Winooski is a newly constructed building that has 4 units, 2 2-bedroom units and 2 4-bedroom units. The 2 2-bedroom units are on the ground floor and the 2 4-bedroom units are the second and third floor. So original design had balconies that on the original one that was approved, and those were not built, and we're asking for amendment on those to have not been built and instead windows replaced. The other was an overhang that sorry. The second was a overhang that kind of ran all the way across the ground floor. And so partial overhangs were built, so we're asking for that approval. And then the third is a far more robust landscaping plan than we think is post-construction is practical and probably best. And so we're asking for that amendment as well. We did add security lights and we did add surveillance or video cameras as well that we'd like to have approved. And so those were the main items that we're asking an amendment approval on. Miss those or did I miss anything?
Yeah. And so during construction, you know, they went into contract and during construction, the builders had presented the removal of the balconies. I had done drawings for them to remove them, and they were supposed to present them to Mary prior to doing them. It was only after the fact that we learned that they never did do a review. And it was intended to be a cost-saving measure. They were reluctant to do the balconies because of water and snow and making sure everything remains maintenance free. So they suggested building a wall and doing a second window there. And it was also based on project cost as well. So their intention was to provide a change order in a savings, which was never also presented to the owner. The canopies themselves, again, during construction, while they were constructing, they had the realization that those needed to be the other side is actually better for that. The north, sorry, yep, right there. That we had to remove, I had originally designed, you know, a steel beam and steel posts leading down. They had costed it at wood, and being the proximity to the other property, this needed to turn into steel.
the original contract was for wood. And so the cost of these canopies rose significantly, so they were reduced in an effort to maintain the budget while also providing adequate shelter for the entries. And then landscape. Brett could go into more detail on the landscape because it's really a property management issue more than anything of why changes have been proposed for that.
Yeah, so I detailed it out in the response. I'm not.
Yeah, if you want to go to the landscape plan, we can just.
Bretton, can you speak up? I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry. How's that? Any better?
Better.
Yeah. So, basically, kind of high level in terms of the landscaping everywhere, both on the roadside of North Winooski, the side of the building, where it had the two maples going in, and then the back part of the parking lot. So you have the detail I sent Mary. I kind of went down each item where we had specific challenges, but generally speaking, needles are an issue, and so we know that now. In fact, I got stabbed. I had to go through this whole precautionary thing and get tested and all this kind of crap, not seen when I was picking up the property. And since then, it's been, I think we've had just under a dozen, and we're talking about the back fence line where the cars are at and on the front. And so, the intent here is to limit what we have, all while trying to be aesthetically pleasing, particularly on the front. So outside of the needle issue, we have the trash cans all get pulled to the front. And if you've ever driven down that street, it's like any bush, it just catches an immense amount of trash. So, particularly on the front side, North Winooski, adding the two single dogwoods and removing the beds and the shrubs, that was done for that measure primarily. On the back side, where those cars are at, that called for bushes. I think primarily it was to kind of shield our neighbor from the headlights. And so, we had people, there was bushes back there originally. And so, you had people, unhoused people living back there, supplies, tons of stuff we found back there. And additionally, they at times had approached our tenants at night, scared the living hell out of them. So again, there, we got rid of what was existing, the overgrowth of shrubs, and just put up a kind of one of those mesh netting across all the back fence to remove the glare. And then in terms of the maple trees on the side there, I mean, from a practical standpoint, having two there, it would just create, considering the size, I mean, it's a beautiful tree. They're very, very, nice looking trees. But at the end of the day, it's going to overwhelm that area. That one tree is sufficient to kind of create the shade it's going to, require for the parking lot. But we're not going to have it growing into our neighbor's backyard, going into the building, going into the bike shelter. And as you know, I mean, it's when these things are first put up there, everything looks great, but you think kind of on a long-term sustainability level, it becomes a maintenance nightmare. And so those are the reasons why we made the changes. It's kind of like after you see it being built, you can see kind of how the property behaves and what's happening. And, I think what we're asking for is based upon how the property lives and breathes today. And so that's kind of that on the landscape.
I think that sums up if there's questions.
And I just want to clarify something, staff. Mary, this is your project?
It is.
When I read your recommended motion, when I read it, you're not recommending we approve the as-built change, the changes requested. I'm a little unclear as to how that's worded.
That's correct. What I'm recommending approval for is the installation of those amenities that were stripped from the plan when it was finished.
Got it, okay.
There were reasons both within the ordinance and for purposes of resident comfort and access that the canopy should be there, that there should be landscaping between the backyard parking and the abutting residential neighborhoods. Quite simply, the plan was not completed as it was approved by the DRB in 2021. For cost saving purposes, it's a really big building. It's a very big building, and some of those design elements were successful in plan to ameliorate the massing of the building, as well as provide resident comfort. And the loss of those is very tangible when you visit the site.
For some reason, I recall a fair amount of discussion about at least the canopy over the ramps. To provide some snow safety for people using the ramps, and particularly the access ramp. I don't know, Brett or Nissa, can you speak to the ability to complete the project as proposed? I can imagine some of those provisions might be easier to implement after the fact than others.
Yeah, I mean, I think the balconies, like, I think that would be very difficult, and we took, you know, the builder's kind of direction on that, both from, hey, you know, wanted the cost to do that when they were doing during COVID, the cost of getting out of control with supplies, and also two, you know, he was concerned about the maintenance, the upkeep on that, and also he reinforced the fact that he thought we were getting water in it. So, like, that concerns me, and I don't want to put those on. I think that would be a significant change to this, and particularly after the fact. And I don't like we never had a complaint about it. Everyone, Steve Lipkin and Luke Lavelle, think it's an absolutely beautiful building the way it is, and tenants really enjoy being in there. They love the big windows. So, like, I think it's all working. I don't know what the.
How about the canopy? I appreciate the balcony challenge. How about the canopies?
So as far as the balcony, the canopies, like Mrs. said, I never received actually one change order from the builder. So all I was told that it was cost prohibitive, and we took their direction on that. I'm not a builder, I build software, and so this for me was, we took the direction. So fine, it's done the way it is, but in what's happened since is, I think, the visibility that we have under those canopies, the amount of people that do not live there, that come through there, people that have tried to get into the foyer, people that sleep by the door, the packages that, you know, try to get lifted. Like, if we have canopies there, we won't have a lens into that. And I don't, like, that is one of the biggest challenges we have with this particular site. And so the building's already been graffitied. We had cameras initially, I had temporary ones lower, they got spray painted. So, like, this is it's expensive to have this building the way it is. And so even today, our security system, I get alerts, and I spend so much darn time with this piece that at night, if I get an alert, I check the cameras, because we have people sleeping by the doors. We have, like, tenants the females are scared. So, like, putting a canopy over that I'm not sure how we actually end up providing secure, like, perimeter around the building. That's a real concern. And that's the benefit of the hindsight, like, so I would prefer to keep them just the way they are, because I think it gives us the best chance to keep the building safe. That's the honest to God's truth.
I'm gonna say this because I feel like I say it to every applicant who comes back to us having built a project that's not consistent with the plans, but you put us in a really difficult position in not coming back to us to request changes to the project before implementing them. And I can appreciate there may be been some communication problems here, but it's your project. And it's your permit, and it's your obligation to follow the permit as permitted, or come get an amendment. So all the after the fact, I understand, and there may be good reasons not to require you to build it that way. But we gotta be really clear with the people who come before us. This is not a do what I want and then ask forgiveness later. So it is really frustrating sitting on this board, and we don't see these infrequently. And I just want to be really clear that I do not look very favorably on anyone coming back here and saying, you know, it's my project, but I didn't build it the way I said I was gonna build it.
Yeah, so I apologize. I'm not like our relationship with our contractor, and it changes, like this was like, we've never done anything like this. So I understand it's our project. We take responsibility. I'm also not happy that we have to put in a position. I'm also not happy that it's turned into quite a mess for us to kind of try to complete and fix and try to get this across the finish line. I know this cannot be enjoyable for you guys, and I apologize. I sincerely do, because I don't think it's very fair. I don't know what else to say, in the sense that, you know, we're trying to make best of what we kind of have got from this contractor. And I'm already in a kind of spot with them where I have no change orders. So you can imagine trying to reconcile has been a nightmare. So I apologize for putting you in that spot.
Thank you. Well, with that, I will close the public hearing. All right, so that is our agenda. We'll. Yeah.
Power extension on Chase Street.
Or is that just for our knowledge?
No,
That's me.
thank you. Well, let's just do that then. On ZP 24-148-49-45-55 Chase Street, I move that we grant the time extension request.
I'll second that.
Kevin seconds, all those in favor? Aye. Thanks. And with that, I'll close the public hearing and let's deliberate on this. We'll entertain doing, yeah, let's leave.
Shut it out.
So 6264 Conger Avenue. Chimneys.
Recording stopped.
Thoughts?
Their primary and singular reason seems to be money.
Correct.
That is not given to me to
They also seem to have taken down the chimneys after being told we probably don't want to take down the chimneys.
Well, it seemed like they had the intention to build them, which would be fine.
Which apparently it's easier to rebuild the chimneys.
I would say, I don't think those are distinctive chimneys. I don't care if they remove them. I don't think it meets the standard, but I don't think any of you are gonna agree with me.
So I agree that they are not distinctive chimneys, but I also understand that that particular district is like.
On ZAP 24-11, which is 6264 Conger Ave, I move that we deny the appeal. Well, it's not an appeal. Yes, I move that we deny the appeal and uphold the decision.
Second? Leo? All those in favor? All
I
those,
lost count. 2, 3, 4.
all those opposed? Not distinctive.
You know, I mean, there's a lot of things about it. I mean, I wish they were restoring the building to historic standards, but they're not. You know, that's sort of window.
It's a the window is.
It's a sort of half-assed restoration, you know?
Yeah, well,
And you look around and a lot of the buildings don't have those chimneys, so. That's all I swear about the chimneys.
fair enough.
How many distinctive characteristics do you move one at a time? That one, no longer is
Theseus's house.
Recording stopped.
On 365 South Winooski Avenue, I move that we reopen the hearing and ask that the city and the applicant bring forward any testimony concerning whether it would be more historically appropriate to replace the roof with a standing seam metal roof or a faux slate roof. And B, ask the applicant to explain how a faux slate roof would impair their ability to install solar on the roof. Second. Just second.
Well, I would object to including the applicant as providing aesthetic, historic portion of it. That sort of eliminates whatever the non-interested third party.
Yeah, but I think we gotta give them the opportunity to be heard on the issue.
And they could bring in somebody who has.
And we can afford it to wait and the credibility we believe appropriate, right? I mean, if it comes in with somebody who has 17 degrees and 6 PhDs, that might be fun. Or if it's someone who just says, standing seam looks good.
Just to note, if anybody goes look at the corner of Caroline and Locust Street, that's a house with Tesla shingles on it.
Yeah.
Looks great.
Oh, all right.
I wouldn't suggest it's huge.
First, much benefit I've heard about Tesla today.
I asked, they were an interesting material when they first released them. I heard the productivity of them as solar panels is not necessarily like it's, but.
But you get a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, we have
Standing seam faux slate or any other material.
yes, or any other reason, fair enough. So those in favor? All right, unanimous.
Yeah, it's kicked down the road already.
Yeah, maybe we'll change the regulations.
Recording.
184, 186 North Winooski. I move that we approve staff's findings and recommendations and deny the request for after the fact deviations from CP 21-150.
Do we have to specifically mention it?
No, she writes them in there.
Good.
All's in favor? All right. Grant the request for alternative compliance. All those in favor?
Recording stopped.